8 mice, 4 male, 4 female, unlimited food, unlimited water, no disease, no predators, no danger of any kind, a perfect world sealed shut. 5 years later, every single one of them was dead, and not one death had a medical cause. This is the story of an experiment that changed how we think about civilization collapse and what it actually means to be alive. In 1968, an American behavioral researcher named John Calhoun began constructing what he called a paradise. Not a metaphor, a literal paradise, built by hand inside a federal research facility in Maryland. He designed a steel enclosure roughly 9 feet square, lined with mesh tunnels and stacked apartment sections running floor to ceiling. Every food hopper was kept permanently full. Every water bottle was permanently topped off. The temperature was held constant. The nesting material was always fresh. He had calculated the enclosure could comfortably house nearly 4,000 mice. It would never get close to that number. Calhoun had been running versions of this experiment since the 1940s. Barns, forests, smaller laboratory enclosures, 24 separate attempts before this one. Each time with different species, different setups, different parameters, he had watched the same pattern unfold. Population surges, then strange behavior, then collapse. Universe 25 was designed to be the definitive version, the cleanest possible test of a single question. What happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? He placed his 8 founders inside on day 1 and closed the lid. For the first 100 days, almost nothing happened. The mice explored their new world, mapped its geography, and established who slept where. Then the first litters arrived, and the population began doubling every 55 days. By day 300, there were more than 600 mice living in the enclosure. They climbed over each other on the ramps, crowded into shared nesting spaces, jostled constantly for position. This is when things began to fall apart. In a natural mouse population, when territory fills up, some mice leave. They disperse, find new ground, start over somewhere else. Inside Universe 25, there was nowhere to go. The young males who reached adulthood with no territory to claim, no females to court, no social role to fill, began drifting into the center of the enclosure. They gathered in passive clusters, lying close together, doing nothing. Calhoun would stand above the pen and watch them for hours. They had everything a mouse could need and nothing a mouse could want. When attacked by other mice, these males stopped fighting back. They absorbed the damage, walked a few feet, and lay down again. But not every displaced male went quiet. A second population emerged at the opposite extreme. These mice became frantic, indiscriminate, and aggressive in ways that violated the social codes every functioning mouse colony relies on. They ignored courtship rituals. They forced themselves into occupied nests. They refused to be deterred by dominant males. In the worst sections of the enclosure, behavior appeared that had never been documented in a stable mouse population. The females retreated. Those who could not find a workable place in the social order climbed to the highest apartment levels and withdrew from all contact. They stopped allowing males to approach. They stopped reproducing entirely. Calhoun also documented what he called the behavioral sink. Even though food was equally available at every dispenser throughout the enclosure, the mice began compulsively crowding around a small number of specific feeders. They would not eat alone. The social instinct had become so entangled with the feeding instinct that a feeder with no other mice present was functionally useless, no matter how full it was. The crowding around a few stations grew denser and denser, while the rest of the enclosure sat untouched. Then the mothers failed in the darkest way possible. Defending a nest in that environment required constant vigilance. The males who had originally held territory became exhausted from endless patrolling and eventually stopped protecting their families. The nursing mothers had to defend themselves while feeding their young. Some began abandoning their pups in scattered locations around the enclosure. Some stopped recognizing their own offspring. Some began killing and eating them. In the worst sections of the colony, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived to weaning age. Calhoun wrote in his notes that by this stage, the social fabric of the colony was functionally dead. The bodies were still alive. The structure that held them together as a species was not. The pups that did survive grew up in a colony where nothing worked the way it was supposed to. They had no model of normal behavior because no normal behavior remained to observe. And when they matured, they behaved in a way Calhoun had never seen before. These mice, the final generation, never fought. They never attempted to mate. They had no interest in any social activity. They ate, they slept, and they groomed themselves continuously. Their coats were perfect because they never engaged in any form of conflict. They moved through the colony as though no other mouse existed. Calhoun named them the beautiful ones. They looked externally like the healthiest mice in the entire enclosure. Physically flawless, calm, well-fed, free from injury. They were also completely non-functional. They could not form relationships. They could not reproduce. Their nervous systems had developed inside a world where every social role was already taken, and they had responded by opting out of participation entirely. The population peaked at 2,200 mice on day 560. It would never rise higher. The last successful conception recorded inside Universe 25 occurred on day 920. After that date, no new mice were born. The colony continued to age. The beautiful ones kept grooming themselves. The isolated females stayed in their high apartments. Violence continued in scattered pockets with no function left to serve. One by one, the mice died of old age with nothing coming up behind them. On May 23, 1973, the last mouse in Universe 25 died. Nearly 5 years after Calhoun sealed the lid, he wrote that the mice had experienced 2 deaths. The first was the death of the spirit. The second was the death of the body. The first one came years before the second. When the paper was published, the world seized on the most obvious interpretation. Comfort kills. Abundance destroys. A life without struggle is a life that dismantles itself. The image of the beautiful ones, physically perfect and quietly going extinct, became one of the defining metaphors of the late 20th century. But that reading missed what Calhoun actually wrote. His real conclusion was different. The cause of collapse was not comfort. It was the disappearance of meaningful roles. The population grew faster than the supply of roles the environment could support. When the number of individuals capable of participating exceeded the number of positions available for them to fill, the system broke down. The fighters had nothing left to fight for. The mothers had nests no one helped them defend. The young had nothing to inherit and no expectation placed on them. The structure that gave each individual a reason to participate in the life of the colony had been erased. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What ran out was something no one thought to put in the paradise. Calhoun spent the rest of his career not cataloging the collapse but trying to prevent it. He kept building new enclosures, changing variables, testing interventions. He believed the outcome was not inevitable. He believed that an animal as cognitively complex as a human being had options the mice did not. He wrote that as physical space fills up, the path forward lies in expanding into conceptual space, into ideas, into the work of creating roles that do not yet exist. He called this ideational generativity, a long phrase for a short idea. When the world fills up around you, you make new reasons to exist inside it. The experiment stands. 8 mice, a perfect world, a complete extinction, and a cause of death that no laboratory report would ever be able to name. The mice did not have a choice. That, Calhoun believed, is the only difference that matters.